She was my best friend. She framed me for fraud. I lost everything, but I got my revenge, and it was perfect. I'm Alina Reeves, and this is the story of how I destroyed the woman who destroyed me. Because sometimes, the most elegant revenge is simply letting someone face the consequences of their own actions. In 1995, I was 29 years old and the youngest vice president in the history of Sterling & Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms. I had everything I thought I wanted: a corner office on the 47th floor, a salary that most people could only dream of, and the respect of colleagues who had initially dismissed me as just another pretty face trying to make it in a man's world. Success came at a price. I had no real friends, no romantic relationships that lasted more than a few months, and a family back in small-town Nebraska who barely recognized the woman I had become. I was brilliant, ambitious, and completely alone, and that loneliness would become the weapon that someone would use to destroy me, because when you're successful and isolated, you become desperate for connection. And when you're desperate for connection, you make the kind of mistakes that can cost you everything. Let me tell you who I was before I became a cautionary tale. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. We lived in a small house with peeling paint and a garden my mother tended like it was her sanctuary. I was the girl who read investment magazines while other kids played outside, who dreamed of Wall Street while surrounded by cornfields. My childhood was marked by isolation. I was too smart for my classmates, too serious, too focused on a future that seemed impossibly far away. I spent most of my time alone, in my room, studying, planning, dreaming of the day I would escape to New York and make something of myself. The loneliness followed me to Columbia Business School, where I graduated at the top of my class but made no lasting friendships. It followed me to my first job at a small investment firm, where I worked 18-hour days to prove myself. And it followed me to Sterling & Associates, where I climbed the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency but never learned how to build genuine relationships. By 1995, I had achieved everything I had dreamed of as a lonely girl in Nebraska. I had a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, a wardrobe that cost more than my parents' annual income, and a professional reputation that opened doors across the financial district. But I ate dinner alone most nights, worked through weekends, and couldn't remember the last time someone had called me just to see how I was doing. That's when Victoria Harrington entered my life, and for the first time in years, I thought I had found not just a colleague, but a friend. Victoria was hired as a senior associate in my department in March 1995. She was everything I wasn't: effortlessly charming, socially connected, the kind of woman who could make anyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. She had honey blonde hair that always looked perfect, a smile that could disarm the most hostile client, and a way of making even the most mundane conversation feel intimate and meaningful. From her first day, she sought me out. She would stop by my office with coffee, ask for my advice on deals, compliment my work in meetings. She seemed genuinely interested in my opinions, my background, my life outside of work. For someone who had been starved of genuine connection, Victoria's attention felt like water in a desert. We started having lunch together, then drinks after work, then weekend shopping trips. She would listen to me talk about my childhood, my dreams, my fears. She seemed to understand the loneliness that had shaped me, the isolation that had driven me to succeed. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had a real friend. But Victoria was ambitious too. She had graduated from Wharton, had connections throughout the financial world, and made no secret of her desire to climb the corporate ladder. I admired her drive, her networking skills, her ability to balance professional success with personal relationships. I thought we were allies in a male-dominated industry. I was so hungry for friendship that I ignored the warning signs. The way she would probe for information about upcoming deals, the way she would steer conversations toward my strategies and methodologies, the way she would subtly undermine other colleagues while building me up. I mistook manipulation for genuine interest, and that mistake would cost me everything. What I didn't know was that Victoria had been studying me from the moment she walked into Sterling & Associates. She had identified my weaknesses, my loneliness, my need for validation, my tendency to trust too easily once my walls came down. She had been planning my downfall with the same precision I used to structure complex financial deals, and she was about to execute a plan so perfect, so devastating. that it would make me question everything I thought I knew about human nature. Stay with me, because this is where my story becomes a masterclass in betrayal. Asterisk, the Meridian Industries deal was the biggest of my career. A $2.8 billion merger that would cement Sterling and Associates' position as a major player in the investment world. I had been working on it for 8 months, building relationships with key stakeholders, structuring the financial framework, navigating regulatory requirements. It was complex, high stakes, and absolutely crucial to the firm's future. Victoria was my right hand on the deal. She attended client meetings, helped prepare presentations, and had access to all the confidential documents. I trusted her completely, sharing strategies and insights that I had never shared with anyone else. She was the sister I had never had, the friend I had always wanted. But Victoria was playing a different game entirely. While I was focused on closing the deal, she was documenting my every move, recording our conversations, and building a case against me. She was also cultivating relationships with senior partners, positioning herself as a concerned colleague, worried about my erratic behavior and questionable decisions. The first sign of trouble came in November. James Morrison, one of the senior partners, called me into his office with a concerned expression. Someone had reported that I had been sharing confidential information with competitors, that I had been making unauthorized changes to deal structures, that I had been behaving strangely in client meetings. The accusations were vague but damaging. When I pressed for specifics, Morrison mentioned concerning reports from trusted colleagues and documented instances of policy violations. He couldn't give me details, he said, because the investigation was ongoing, but he wanted me to know that the firm was taking these allegations seriously. I left that meeting feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. I had worked so hard to build my reputation, to prove myself in a world that had initially dismissed me. The idea that someone was trying to destroy that reputation was almost incomprehensible. But I still didn't suspect Victoria. I was too naive, too trusting, too desperate to believe that our friendship was real. Asterisk, the trap was sprung on December 15, 1995. I was in my office, reviewing final documents for the Meridian deal, when Morrison burst in with 2 other senior partners and a representative from the SEC. They had evidence. They said that I had been engaged in insider trading, market manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty. The evidence was overwhelming and completely fabricated. They had recordings of phone calls I had supposedly made to competitors, revealing confidential information about the Meridian deal. They had documents with my signature authorizing trades that would have benefited me personally at the expense of our clients. They had witness statements describing meetings where I had allegedly discussed illegal strategies, but the most damaging evidence came from my own computer. Someone had planted files showing a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, all supposedly connected to me. The forensic analysis showed that these files had been created using my login credentials, accessed during hours when I was supposedly alone in the office. But Victoria sat in that conference room, her face a mask of concerned professionalism, as they presented evidence of my guilt. She even spoke up once, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine emotion, to say how shocked she was by these revelations. She had worked so closely with me, she said, and had never suspected anything. But I caught it, just for a moment, the flash of satisfaction in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. And in that instant, I understood everything. The friendship, the trust, the shared confidences, it had all been a lie. Victoria had been planning my destruction from the moment she met me, and she had used my own loneliness and desperation for connection as weapons against me. The SEC investigation was swift and brutal. Within days, my assets were frozen, my trading licenses revoked, my reputation destroyed. The financial press had a field day, rising star falls from grace, the dark side of Wall Street's success, how a promising career ended in scandal. My photo was on the cover of every financial magazine, not as a success story, but as a cautionary tale. I was fired immediately, of course. Security escorted me from the building like a common criminal, carrying my personal belongings in a cardboard box. The same colleagues who had once sought my advice now avoided eye contact. The same clients, who had trusted me with their fortunes, now saw me as a pariah. The legal bills consumed what little savings I had left. I hired the best criminal defense attorney I could afford, but the evidence against me was sophisticated and compelling. My lawyer advised me to consider a plea bargain, to admit to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, but I refused. I knew I was innocent, even if I couldn't prove it. The isolation was crushing. My few acquaintances in New York disappeared overnight. Dating became impossible. Who wanted to be associated with a disgraced financial professional? I moved from my penthouse to a studio apartment in Queens, then to a shared apartment in Brooklyn, then to a single room in a boarding house that smelled of mildew and despair. But the worst part wasn't the poverty or the loneliness. It was watching Victoria thrive. She had been promoted to my old position, was featured in financial publications as a rising star, and was photographed at charity galas and industry events. She had taken my life, my career, my future, and she was wearing it like a beautiful dress. I would lie awake at night in my tiny room, planning my revenge, not the dramatic, violent kind of revenge you see in movies, but something more sophisticated, more elegant. I would use the same intelligence and strategic thinking that had made me successful to destroy the woman who had destroyed me. I just needed to be patient, to wait for the right opportunity, to plan every move with the precision of a master chess player. My salvation came from an unexpected source. Marcus Chen was a forensic accountant who had been working peripherally on the SEC investigation. He was brilliant, detail-oriented, and had a reputation for uncovering financial fraud that others missed. More importantly, he was someone who valued truth over politics, facts over appearances. Chen had been bothered by inconsistencies in the evidence against me. The sophistication of the alleged fraud didn't match my known methodologies. The timing of certain transactions didn't align with my documented whereabouts. The digital forensics showed signs of manipulation that suggested someone with advanced technical knowledge. He began his own investigation, working nights and weekends to trace the digital breadcrumbs that had been left behind. What he discovered was a masterpiece of financial manipulation and character assassination. Victoria hadn't just framed me. She had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated corporate conspiracies in Wall Street history. The shell companies and offshore accounts were real, but they belonged to Victoria, not me. She had been siphoning money from client accounts for months, using a complex system of trades and transfers that would have been impossible to detect without insider knowledge. She had used my access codes, my signature stamps, my personal information to create a trail that led directly to me. But Victoria had made one crucial mistake. She had been too clever, too thorough in her planning. The evidence against me was almost too perfect, too convenient. Chun's analysis showed that the digital evidence had been created in a single session, uploaded to my computer during a weekend when I was supposedly alone in the office. But security footage showed that Victoria had been in the building that night, using her access card to enter areas where she had no business being. The real breakthrough came when Chen traced the phone calls that had allegedly been made from my office. The calls had been made using voice modulation software, but the background noise analysis revealed the distinctive hum of the ventilation system in Victoria's office, not mine. She had been sitting in her own office, using technology to make it sound like I was making incriminating calls from my phone. Armed with Chen's evidence, I could have gone to the authorities immediately, but that would have been too simple, too quick. Victoria had destroyed my life slowly, methodically, savoring every moment of my downfall. I wanted her to experience the same gradual realization that her world was crumbling around her. I started with small moves, anonymous tips to financial regulators about suspicious trading patterns in her accounts, carefully placed rumors about her personal life that created doubt about her character, strategic leaks to financial journalists about inconsistencies in her rise to prominence. Nothing that could be traced back to me, but everything designed to create a growing sense of unease about Victoria Harrington. Then I began to target her. Professionally, I used my knowledge of her methods and weaknesses to feed information to her competitors. I arranged for former clients to ask uncomfortable questions about deals she had handled. I made sure that key industry figures began to question her judgment, her integrity, her competence. The masterstroke came when I orchestrated a situation where Victoria would have to choose between protecting herself and protecting the firm. I fed her information about a fictional regulatory investigation that would supposedly expose her crimes. Panicking, she began to destroy evidence, liquidate hidden assets, and distance herself from deals that could implicate her. But every move she made was being documented. Every email she deleted was being recovered. Every asset she tried to hide was being traced. She was destroying herself with the same thoroughness she had used to destroy me, and she didn't even realize it. The final trap was set during a client meeting that I had secretly arranged. Victoria walked into a conference room, expecting to close a major deal, only to find FBI agents, SEC investigators, and federal prosecutors waiting for her. The evidence against her was overwhelming, undeniable, and gathered using the same meticulous attention to detail that she had used against me. But unlike my public disgrace, Victoria's downfall was swift and brutal. She was arrested in front of her colleagues, led away in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. The financial press that had once celebrated her success now dissected her crimes with the same enthusiasm they had once shown for my supposed failures. Victoria's confession came 3 days after her arrest. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of life in prison, she admitted to everything: the embezzlement, the frame-up, the systematic destruction of my career and reputation. She had stolen over $15 million from client accounts, created false evidence to implicate me, and manipulated the investigation to ensure my downfall. The vindication was complete and public. The SEC issued a formal apology, acknowledging that their investigation had been compromised by false evidence. Sterling and Associates offered me a settlement that included full compensation for my lost earnings, punitive damages for the destruction of my reputation, and a senior partnership position if I chose to return. But I had learned something valuable during my time in exile. Success without authenticity is hollow. Achievement without genuine relationships is meaningless. I had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that I had forgotten to build a life worth living. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She lost everything: her career, her wealth, her freedom, her reputation. She would spend the next decade and a half in a small cell, reflecting on how her ambition and jealousy had destroyed not just my life, but her own. The woman who had once been featured on magazine covers as a rising star was now a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and moral bankruptcy. She had tried to steal my life, and in the end, she had lost her own. Today, I run my own boutique investment firm. I have a small team of people I trust, clients who value my expertise, and a life that feels authentic and meaningful. I never returned to Sterling and Associates. I didn't need their validation or their partnership. I had something more valuable: the knowledge that I had survived their worst and emerged stronger. Victoria sits in federal prison, serving her sentence and thinking about the choices that led her there. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets what she did, if she understands the magnitude of her betrayal. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. She was a chapter in my story, not the ending. The loneliness that once made me vulnerable to manipulation has been replaced by carefully chosen relationships built on mutual respect and genuine connection. I learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that success shared with people who truly care about you is infinitely more valuable than achievements celebrated in isolation. My revenge was perfect, not because it was cruel, but because it was just. I didn't destroy Victoria, she destroyed herself. I simply made sure that the truth was revealed and that justice was served. Sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply allowing someone to face the consequences of their own actions. This is my story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate triumph. This is how I learned that the best revenge is not just success, but authentic success built on truth, integrity, and genuine human connection. Thank you for watching. Remember, in a world full of people who will use your loneliness against you, the greatest revenge is learning to be genuinely happy in your own skin. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment for more women's stories.